American farmers are facing a brutal reality that many warned about but few believed would hit this hard. Trump's tariffs, once promised as a shield for U.S. agriculture, are now crushing the very people they were meant to protect. In the heartland of America, where corn, soybeans, and wheat dominate the landscape, farmers are waking up to collapsing export markets, falling crop prices, and rising input costs. The trade war with China, reignited under Trump's new round of tariffs, has slammed shut the biggest overseas market for American crops, leaving silos overflowing and profits vanishing. What was sold as a strategy to make America strong again on the global stage is now looking like a slow-motion collapse of rural America's economic backbone. The numbers don't lie. Since the tariffs were imposed, U.S. soybean exports to China, once worth billions annually, have plummeted, forcing farmers to dump crops at a loss or rely on government bailout checks that barely keep operations alive. The agricultural sector, already stressed by high debt and unpredictable weather, now faces a man-made economic war that's bleeding them dry. And yet, Trump continues to double down, framing tariffs as a weapon against Beijing's unfair practices. But the reality on the ground tells a very different story. Farmers are not only losing access to international buyers, they're also being undercut by countries like Brazil, which is stepping in to grab the very markets America has abandoned. Every day the trade war drags on, Brazil's soybean exports to China climb, while American farmers are sidelined. The ripple effects don't stop there. Farm equipment sales are declining as farmers slash spending, rural banks are reporting rising loan defaults, and small towns dependent on agriculture are experiencing a new wave of financial despair. Trump's rhetoric paints tariffs as a patriotic necessity, but to the farmer in Iowa, Kansas, or Nebraska, it feels more like a betrayal. Families who once supported Trump overwhelmingly in the last election are now questioning whether loyalty to his policies is worth the destruction of their livelihoods. In 2018 and 2019, similar trade tensions led to billions in federal aid packages to farmers, essentially paying them for the losses tariffs created. Critics argue that history is repeating itself, with taxpayer money once again being used as a band-aid over a self-inflicted wound. And the global competition is not waiting. China, tired of U.S. uncertainty, is aggressively locking in long-term deals with South American producers, securing a stable food supply chain that bypasses American farmers entirely. Once those trade routes solidify, it may be impossible for the U.S. to reclaim its dominance in agricultural exports. The question now isn't just about short-term pain, it's whether America is sacrificing its agricultural future for the sake of political headlines. Trump continues to promise farmers that better deals are coming, but on the ground, hope is wearing thin. Each harvest that goes unsold, each acre that fails to break even, chips away at the faith that rural America once had in his vision. If this trend continues, the impact could go far beyond farms. It could reshape the political map of America, turning one of Trump's strongest bases into one of his loudest critics. And if that shift happens, the fallout won't just be economic, it will be political, and potentially devastating. The heart of the crisis lies in the collapse of U.S. exports, and the numbers are staggering. China, once the single largest buyer of American soybeans, has slashed its imports from the U.S. to levels not seen in over a decade. Before tariffs, more than half of U.S. soybean exports went directly to Chinese ports. Today, that market is practically gone, with Chinese buyers turning to Brazil and Argentina to secure supply. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's own reports confirm what farmers already know: export volumes have cratered, and with them, farm incomes have plunged. For every million tons of soybeans China now buys from Brazil, American farmers lose hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, money that is not coming back. This isn't a seasonal dip. It's a structural shift in global trade, one that could permanently reposition the U.S. as a second-tier supplier. Meanwhile, the tariffs Trump imposed were supposed to force China into concessions, but Beijing has played a longer game. Instead of bowing to Washington, China diversified its supply lines, investing billions in South American infrastructure, railways, and ports to ensure future reliance on Brazil over the United States. In other words, while America is locked in a trade fight, China is building new systems to bypass it. And that is why economists are calling this a self-inflicted wound. America has disrupted its own strongest export market while its rivals reap the benefits. The damage isn't limited to soybeans. Corn, wheat, pork, and dairy are all caught in the crossfire. China has imposed retaliatory tariffs that make U.S. goods more expensive, while simultaneously offering subsidies to domestic producers and importing aggressively from other nations. For U.S. farmers, this means not only are they locked out of their biggest buyer, but they are also being undercut in global pricing. The irony is painful. Farmers who once believed Trump's policies would protect them from unfair competition now find themselves less competitive than ever. And Washington's response? Emergency aid packages that critics call nothing more than hush money. The billions in subsidies do little more than cover operating costs, leaving no room for growth, investment, or stability. Rural America is being asked to survive on government checks while watching its future slip away to foreign competitors. Meanwhile, global giants like Brazil's agribusiness sector are booming, capturing contracts once reserved for American companies. The long-term consequences of these shifts are profound. Trade relationships are not temporary. Once a buyer builds trust and supply lines with another country, switching back is not automatic. China's pivot to South America is not a short-term patch, it is a deliberate strategy to permanently weaken American leverage. And as these trade links deepen, U.S. farmers face the possibility that even if tariffs were lifted tomorrow, their market share would not fully return. What makes this more alarming is the political silence surrounding it. Trump frames tariffs as leverage, insisting that farmers will win in the end. But win what? Each month of lost trade strengthens America's rivals and deepens farmer despair. Reports from rural states reveal rising farm bankruptcies, mental health crises, and generational farms being sold off after decades of operation. These are not abstract economic indicators, these are the lives of families being dismantled by policies they once supported. The irony is cutting. Trump's trade war was designed to punish Beijing, but the ones paying the highest price are the very Americans who voted him into power. And yet, the White House continues to portray tariffs as a victory, while the agricultural belt quietly bleeds. The longer this continues, the greater the risk that rural America's patience will run out. The political fallout of Trump's tariff war is now colliding directly with the very voter base that carried him into power, America's farmers. In 2016 and again in 2020, rural states formed the backbone of Trump's electoral strength, delivering massive margins in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, the Dakotas, and across the Midwest. These states are not just political red zones, they are agricultural powerhouses, home to the soybean fields, corn belts, and livestock farms now bearing the brunt of collapsing exports. The farmers who once cheered Trump's promises to take on China now find themselves asking whether their loyalty is costing them their livelihoods. Town hall meetings, agricultural conventions, and rural radio programs reveal a growing undercurrent of frustration. Farmers are openly questioning why they should continue supporting a leader whose policies have left them with overflowing grain bins and shrinking bank accounts. The contradiction is glaring. Trump frames tariffs as a patriotic stand against foreign exploitation, but farmers see only the wreckage of markets they spent decades building. What makes this political backlash so dangerous for Trump is the scale of dependency rural America has on international trade. Unlike urban industries, farming cannot simply pivot to domestic markets. The U.S. produces far more soybeans, corn, and wheat than it can ever consume at home. Exports are not optional, they are the lifeblood of American agriculture. Without access to global buyers, especially China, the numbers simply do not add up. Farmers know this. They understand that no amount of government aid or patriotic slogans can replace long-term export contracts. And that is why patience is thinning. Reports from Iowa suggest that younger farmers, who are often more debt-burdened and less financially resilient, are the first to voice political disillusionment. Some are considering shifting their votes, others are simply disengaging, tired of promises that never materialize. The Republican Party risks a crack in one of its most reliable constituencies, and the timing could not be worse with another election cycle looming. Meanwhile, Democrats are seizing the opportunity. Political strategists are already targeting rural discontent, framing Trump's tariffs as proof that his "America First" policies have left America weaker, not stronger. Campaign ads highlighting farmer bankruptcies and trade losses are beginning to surface, attempting to chip away at Trump's rural firewall. Even independent farmer organizations are breaking their silence, issuing sharp statements that question whether continued support for Trump is sustainable. This does not mean rural America is about to flip blue overnight, loyalty and identity run deep, but the erosion of enthusiasm could be enough to shift margins in key swing states. A few thousand disillusioned farmers in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania could mean the difference between victory and defeat. But perhaps the most dangerous political risk is not farmers turning to Democrats, but farmers staying home. Rural turnout has been Trump's secret weapon, with record numbers showing up to support him in past elections. If disillusionment leads to apathy, and apathy leads to lower turnout, the consequences could be devastating. Trump does not need to lose the farm vote entirely, he simply needs farmers to stop showing up in the same overwhelming numbers. And that possibility is no longer theoretical. Polls conducted in Midwestern states show a clear dip in approval ratings among agricultural households, with many citing tariffs as their number one grievance. The loyalty that once felt unshakable is beginning to crack. While farmers struggle in the fields, the ripple effects of Trump's tariff war are shaking the broader U.S. economy and Wall Street's confidence in America's trade future. Markets despise uncertainty, and the unpredictable swings in tariff announcements have created exactly that. Every new round of duties triggers sell-offs in agricultural stocks, equipment manufacturers, and even transportation companies that depend on global shipping routes. Companies like Deere & Company, which supply farm machinery, have reported declining sales, not because demand for food has vanished, but because farmers no longer have the income or credit security to invest in new equipment. Railroads and shipping companies are watching volumes fall as exports dry up, and that slowdown ripples into steelmakers, fuel suppliers, and insurers. A chain reaction is underway, where one policy decision meant to punish China ends up punishing a vast network of American industries. The irony is hard to ignore. Wall Street, which Trump often cites as a measure of his economic success, is now flashing warning signs that the trade war could drag the U.S. into deeper instability. But the problem extends far beyond domestic markets. Global confidence in the reliability of U.S. trade has been badly damaged. For decades, America positioned itself as the world's most stable supplier, a nation that could be trusted to deliver agricultural goods without political interference. That reputation is now in tatters. International buyers, from Asia to the Middle East, are asking whether they can risk long-term contracts with a country that might suddenly weaponize tariffs for political gain. Competitors like Brazil and even Russia are eager to step into the void, offering not only crops but also predictability. And once trust is lost in trade, it is incredibly difficult to rebuild. Economists warn that the United States may have inflicted a wound that no future administration can fully heal. Even if tariffs are lifted, the perception that America is an unreliable partner will linger, pushing buyers to diversify away from U.S. products permanently. At the same time, Trump's tariff escalation has emboldened America's rivals. China, far from being crippled, has turned the crisis into an opportunity to deepen its influence in global markets. By locking in agricultural deals with South America and expanding Belt and Road trade networks, Beijing has positioned itself as the steady hand in an unstable system. The very strategy Trump promised would weaken China may have strengthened it instead, by forcing other nations into tighter economic alignment with Beijing. That shift is not only economic, it is geopolitical. America's credibility as the world's dominant trading power is being questioned, and the consequences could reverberate for decades. The Federal Reserve has also been pulled into the storm. With farm incomes collapsing and global trade slowing, pressure mounts for interest rate cuts to cushion the damage. But cutting rates to offset tariff pain risks fueling inflation and asset bubbles. The Fed is stuck between protecting short-term growth and preserving long-term stability, while Trump publicly demands easier money to mask the fallout of his policies. This public feud between the White House and the central bank only deepens Wall Street's anxiety. Investors see not just trade instability, but also policy dysfunction at the highest levels of government. And when investors lose confidence, capital flees, markets destabilize, and ordinary Americans pay the price through job losses, higher costs, and weaker growth. At this point, the stakes have moved far beyond soybeans, corn, or even rural politics. Trump's tariff gamble has placed America's credibility, its economic stability, and even its political future on the line. For farmers, the pain is immediate and personal: crops rotting in storage, mounting debts, and shrinking hope. For Wall Street, the pain is systemic: declining investor confidence, rattled markets, and rising fears of a long-term slowdown. And for America's global position, the pain is strategic: the loss of trust as the world's most dependable trading partner, and the rapid rise of rivals ready to seize what the US is giving away. Trump's defenders argue that these are temporary sacrifices, necessary to bring China to the table. But that logic is wearing thin. Beijing has not surrendered; instead, it has adapted, building new supply lines, securing new partners, and making long-term moves that could permanently weaken US leverage. Far from forcing China into retreat, the tariffs may have accelerated a shift in global power. The political consequences are just as explosive. Trump cannot afford to lose the farmers who once rallied behind him as the symbol of forgotten America. But the silence is breaking. Farmers are speaking out in frustration, grassroots organizations are warning of betrayal, and rural communities are quietly reconsidering their loyalties. Even if they don't flip to Democrats, the erosion of enthusiasm and turnout could devastate Trump's electoral strategy. A political map that once seemed secure could suddenly wobble, especially in swing states where slim margins decide outcomes. For a president who thrives on loyalty, the growing skepticism from his strongest base may be the most dangerous signal yet. Meanwhile, America's rivals are capitalizing on every misstep. Brazil, Argentina, and even Russia are expanding their agricultural exports. China is cementing new alliances that will outlast any temporary US policy. The European Union is positioning itself as a more reliable trading partner for emerging markets. Piece by piece, the monopoly of trust that once made the US the center of global commerce is slipping away. The irony is brutal: a trade war meant to make America strong again is opening doors for others to become stronger in its place. And once those doors are fully opened, they will not close. Trade routes, supply chains, and alliances are sticky; they do not revert overnight. America may find that when the dust settles, its share of global influence has permanently declined. The domestic picture is no less grim. Rising farm bankruptcies are leaving scars on rural America, scars that won't heal quickly even if policies change. Young farmers, many of whom took on massive debt to modernize their operations, are at risk of being driven out of the industry entirely. Once family farms vanish, they rarely return. Corporations and foreign investors often swoop in, consolidating farmland, leaving communities weaker and less independent. This hollowing out of rural America is not just an economic crisis, it is a cultural one, striking at the heart of the nation's identity. Trump continues to frame the tariffs as a patriotic battle, a fight worth enduring for the sake of long-term victory. But for those watching from the outside, the reality is stark: America is bleeding markets, losing allies, and testing the patience of its own people. The question now is not whether tariffs can be sustained, but whether America can survive the cost of sustaining them.